Okay, thanks everyone. So it's really good to be here today. I was only, as I said, not just because I'm giving the talk, but it's a really interesting topic. So as I said, I'm Elizabeth Newbold. I work at the Science and Technologies Facilities Council, and my job there is I'm the theme lead for open science, which has many facets to it, as you can imagine. Partly I support our researchers within the national laboratories, and I have a team of research support staff. I have some data curators, I have library staff, I have open access things, people. So there's a whole range of activities. And I also work on externally funded projects. My background is very much in providing access to scientific information, and I've worked with research data, open access, and proprietary and subscription-based information for all of my career in the sciences, in library and information roles. I do work on externally funded projects. I work on some projects from the EU around FAIR, but I really am not a researcher. I would say I very much sit in the camp of I am a research support professional. And that's where I'm coming from this perspective. And one of the projects and things, activities that I'm involved in is the PSDI service. So you're my community. I'm not a chemist by training. I've worked with chemists, I support chemists, I support all sorts of disciplines and domains. So firstly, what is PSDI? And it obviously stands for the Physical Sciences Data Infrastructure, but that is a mouthful, so we call it PSDI, and I will continue to refer to it as PSDI. So the PSDI is a funded project from UKRI via EPSRC, and it's part of a digital research infrastructure programme of work that UKRI funds, which is very much about, developing and building state-of-the-art digital research infrastructures. It's a collaboration between a number of partners, University of Southampton, as you've heard, and a lot of people are well represented here, and STFC, and we hold the grants. We also have a lot of other project partners, and some of them, like DCC and CCDC, are recognised here today as well. And it's been going on for quite a while. We've had a pilot phase, we've had a phase 1, a phase 1B, we're into phase 2, I believe now. So there's been a lot of work going on in the last few years around this, but we're now at the stage of really thinking that we are going to start launching a version 1 imminently as the first stage of moving from a more of a research stage into actually delivering an infrastructure. So why do we need a PSDI, and what's the aim of this? There are activities going on in other domains. There are some very well established infrastructures in other domains. There's EBI in the life sciences, there are data centres for the environmental sciences and social sciences. There's activities in other countries and initiatives in the US and in Japan and Europe, and you might have heard about the German initiatives in the NFDI. But in the UK, there wasn't really anything particularly around physical sciences. And there is a sort of perceived and backed up by a statement of need around the UK chemistry materials and the related disciplines, and how they also interface with other domains. Nothing really sits in a silo. As you know, all research is very interconnected, especially in physical sciences. And we also want to think about interfacing with international initiatives, because nothing sits in one country, and we're all about collaboration. So that is really an aim. And data is a major driver of research in physical sciences. It's not just an accidental research output. It is really one of the things that actually drives future research and discovery. I mean, I'm not saying that isn't the case in other disciplines, because of course it is, but it's a really key thing where we're coming from. We're not talking about this as sort of an accidental or just a research output. We are thinking about this as core infrastructure that connects and is essential for doing the research. And I know some of you all talked about, how do getting your researchers to share. Well, we don't see this as about a compliance. Somebody mentioned dealing with compliance and things. This is really about doing your good science and doing your good research. And how can we make that easier for people to do? And as everything, physical science, we're transitioning to a fully digitally enabled research discipline. Is our aim. There's sort of a number of factors that come together for this. We want to look at connecting existing infrastructures. There are a lot of infrastructures out there. There's activities in universities, there's activities in commercial organisations, we talked about publishers and data providers. There's national facilities, I work at the national laboratories, all over the place. And we want to really look about how we can connect this existing infrastructure together to make a more coherent approach for the domain. And that requires the best use of data, it requires us to look at the best use of technology, and also one of the things we're talking about, and people in the room today, is how we can make the best use of people, because none of this activity happens without having people and support professionals to work with researchers and to drive this forward. I did mention there has been a lot of people involved in the PSDI so far, some people you'll recognise, and people are coming to this, like the DCC, from a very much research support perspective. We have CCDC, who do trusted resources already, and they're going to talk about that later. And we also have a lot of research partners who are actually active researchers who are contributing what we call pathfinders for driving the requirements of the project forward. There are a lot of diverse pathfinders, and they are driving the requirements around the research lifecycle. And while some of this is actually from the active researchers, you will see with just the call-out boxes on the screen that these also impact on us as research support professionals or librarians. You know, we help support data management plans, but what does this mean for the physical sciences? You know, how can we help them more specifically? You know, metadata for search and discovery. There's a lot of metadata and domain-specific metadata, which our researchers are all very familiar with, maybe in the physical sciences, but there's other expertise that we can bring to that field as well to help better aid discovery and sharing, and to give a wider perspective, because people in research fields, as we all know, can often get a little bit, you know, in their own space, and they don't necessarily realise how it can be useful for other people or how it interacts with other infrastructures or other areas of research. And I think, you know, we have expertise around storing and curating, and we also are quite familiar with actions around publishing data objects and familiarity with provenance. So all these activities are really important for the researchers, and they all, you know, are contributing to that. But it is, as you can see, something which is really important for our community as research data professionals as well, and what we can do in our roles to do that. So some of the initial features that we'll be looking at are data software and model sharing, looking at common catalogue for some of these activities, and we're also looking at repositories for being a place for people to share their data and models. We're looking at how we can combine data from different sources to improve the research and resource discovery aspect of finding research data, because it's not always easy. We talked about the access to reference to quality data, because that is obviously what people really care about, not just any old data, they want quality data. And to go around all of this and to support it as well is looking at training and guidance. And training and guidance for researchers, but also for other people who might be using the service or what might else be needed. And then we have grand ambitions for the future as well, about community collections. There's a lot of computational science. Somebody mentioned they work as a computational physicist with scientists. We have a lot of computational scientists and computational chemists involved in the project as well. And we're looking at what they're doing, workflows and sharing that type of activity. The whole activity around policy and standards for open science, and how we can build the communities to go alongside this. So some of the projects that are in development, and some of these will be coming to you soon, as they say. We're looking at enabling cross-search, cross-data search across different sources of data, data retrieval services, data conversion, guidance, and training materials, and some activities around workflows for reproducibility, which is possibly a little bit in the later phases. So just a little bit about some of these. So we are building a knowledge base, which will provide the guidance of physical scientists and those who support physical scientists, and there'll be a range of topics related to research data, the PSDI technology and resources themselves, but as I said, the topics related to research data can be maybe more general, and that is going to be a growing collection of content that can be built with the community and with input from the community. We've talked about access to training materials, there'll be technical support, FAQs, and that could include things like guidance on data management planning, is one example. The cross-data search is being designed to enable a user to search across multiple data sets and data sources in a single query. So there are a number of well-curated and trusted data sources, but they sit in their own platforms. You know, these are separate projects, but people want to be able to search across. So one of the things we've been looking at is how to bring these into a cross-search that will be enabled through the PSDI service, so that it's not a one-stop shop, because that's a really silly term, but it is definitely an aid to discovery to help people to get the best out of these trusted resources without having to think, oh, which one do I go to first and how do I start, and without having to repeat the same search in multiple places. So that's one of the aims of the cross-data search. As you all know, the I in FAIR is one of the more challenging aspects that we talk about in interoperability, and it's a major issue in the physical sciences. One of the real problems is there's a load of file formats that are used in software, and it is absolutely ridiculous to think that everybody would standardise. That's just not going to happen, and there's no need to. So one of the sort of tools, for want of a better word, that's being developed and will be piloted is a data format conversion service. So people can upload their data in a particular format and get it back in a different format, which we think will be a useful activity and addition service for people. I think at the moment, and Sammy, who will be here later, he's worked on this. There's over 200 file formats that can be supported within this. And reproducible scientific workflows. As you all know, the papers don't necessarily contain enough information to allow simulation or analysis, and we're looking at how we can capture some of this and the data provenance. First stage we're also looking at is the data that is being generated. We will have a data repository, for want of a better word, that will be available for some trusted, in the first place, some trusted community members to be able to upload some data to make that shareable with sort of generic metadata that helps you find things. So it's a typical, bibliographic type of metadata, but also subject-specific metadata for the scientific community. So that's very much a partnership between general research data support type of activity and the research community about what they need and what they want to put out and how they want to describe it. We're looking at some biomolecular simulations within that area. And part of that we're also discussing is how do you go about doing community curation of these activities? What's acceptable standards? All those sorts of issues that we have around if you've got a repository, who can use it, who can put things into it, and are we happy with what's in there? We've talked a lot about community. Everybody's here because they want to be part of a community, and this is really, we think, is important. It's not just about the technical infrastructure that PSDI can provide, but it is also about building that community of researchers. It could be building a community of early career researchers. It can be building the community of research technical professionals and librarians, and across those communities, which I think is important, to provide a mechanism and a forum and a place where we can talk across communities, where we can share best practice, we can develop training, we can have advocacy. I think somebody mentioned that how can you persuade people to do things? You need advocacy, and being part of a network and a community like this and an infrastructure can really help with that. With that goal, I think. And it's also really important to have the community to feed into the requirements gathering exercises. This is a data infrastructure for the community, by the community, which I think is really important to stress. It's not people just sitting in a room thinking, oh, what might be useful? It really has to be practically useful for people to use. And as you can see, so, we have various ways of engaging. We're looking at informing, consulting, collaborating, and guiding. And these all work together. It's not like, oh, we've informed, we've consulted, and we've collaborated. This is ongoing, and we see this is ongoing throughout the entire life cycle of the project, and hopefully into the service in the future. We mentioned training and guidance, and we are gathering existing training materials. We're trying to make use of best practice guidelines, or maybe we should say good practice, because maybe there isn't such a thing as best practice, I don't know. And self-directed training courses with a Moodle application, and various other activities which we would see building on and developing as time progresses. And I think what we're saying is not about creating everything from scratch, but it's also looking for where there's gaps, where there may be need for resources that don't exist, and where we can build other update resources as well, or commission activities. So there's been a lot of findings from community building so far. I don't think any of this is surprising to anybody who works in research data management. A lack of knowledge and support. Researchers often want to share data, but they lack the necessary knowledge and support. Or when they want to share data, it might be, some researchers probably don't even think about sharing data until they talk about it. But when they do, it's how do they do that? Because they don't necessarily know the best ways of doing that. There's established standards, and documenting data can be difficult, even with standards. And so there's documentation issues. Compliance drivers. Yeah, that's one thing. But I would really like to think this is not about compliance, but it's help support compliance rather than being about compliance. If you do, if you share your data, if you do good research data, if you work collaboratively, then you're hopefully by default ticking these boxes of what people want to see. How can we do things better and less time consuming? How can we share the knowledge? And sensitive data always comes up. And there's the perception of data reuse. It's one of those things that, reusing data can often be seen as less value than collecting it or generating new data sets. But I think also in a lot of studies, everybody always says, they want to use other people's data, but they don't necessarily want to share their data, or they're less happy about sharing their data. And that can be a perception of, the effort involved in sharing your data. So if we can remove some of those barriers, hopefully we can get to a position where people are more confident about sharing their data as well, even if they can't necessarily see the reason why somebody else wants to use it. So we are still at an early stage, although there's been a lot of work that's been going on, that we are at the early stage because we are going to be making things available in the next few months. And we continue to need community input to develop the complete picture and to drive the developments. So PSDI is really about supporting research and researchers, but not just for active researchers, but also for people working in research support. It really is about everybody. So whilst we go through these next 2 days or day and a half, whatever we've got left, as professionals supporting researchers, you have a role to play in this development and implementation. We don't see it as a bystander or what can we do. We really feel that this is for everybody. So we'd like to think about, how would PSDI help you to support researchers and research in your organisation? What are the key areas of support which are most needed? You might think, well, actually, loads of stuff are really good, it's fine, but what we really need is this. And then what could you contribute to PSDI? This is sort of, as we say, a two-way activity. And we'd like to start to think about how might you be able to contribute? What might you want to be involved in the future? And I'm just going to flick through these just to show you, because when the slides are available, there's lots of documentation about the project, relevant websites, and there's some webinars as well. So thank you.